now it's my pleasure to bring on stage our Training for Tomorrow panelists, starting off with Kate Knibbs, who is the staff writer for The Ringer. Dr. Holly Yanco, who's the director of the Nerve Center over at UMass Lowell. Dr. Patricia Gentile, who is the president of North Shore Community College. And John Valverde, who's the CEO of Youth Build.
Hey guys, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Are you guys ready to talk about the future of work? I am not an expert, but I am extremely interested in the future of work and how to train people for the jobs of tomorrow, because as a member of the media, I'm sort of confident that I might need to be retrained in the near future. I'm not super, I'm not feeling great. So I'm very, very excited to talk with you guys. Just to start off the conversation, I'm curious, broadly speaking, what you think the workforce is going to look like 10 years from now, and how can we get ready to be a part of it?
So I'm a roboticist, so there's going to be robots everywhere. But, as I like to say, robots are good. Robots are not taking our jobs. Robots are changing our jobs, and they're going to allow us to do more things than we can do right now. So one of the projects I work on are exoskeletons. So if you have a job that's repetitive, it can cause a lot of injuries. But if you have an exoskeleton that can help you support the weight of a tool that you have to lift many times over your head, it can prevent injuries. So we can make robots that can help people do their jobs more effectively. Just as you were hearing with Biobots just before this, we can make technology that allow people to work with robots to bring manufacturing back here to the US. We're not trying to take jobs away in robotics. We're really trying to bring more jobs back here to the US.
And clearly, one of the things that's already apparent is that the workforce of the future is going to be much more diverse. And what you'll find is many of those potential workers, very promising workers, are enrolled right now at community colleges across the country. In fact, almost 50% of all those who are undergraduates are enrolled in a community college. We have about 1,100 of them across the country, 15 right here in Massachusetts. We have at North Shore Community College, which is just north of Boston, we encompass what we call 3 gateway cities. And these are cities that are defined by some neighborhoods that are extremely poor. These particular cities are also highly diverse, with a large Hispanic Latino population. And we know that the achievement challenges for first-generation students, these are those who don't possibly grow up in a family that understands what higher education is, or really can help prepare that student both academically and financially for the rigors of a post-secondary education. And so we work with, I'll just give you a quick little profile of our students. At North Shore, we have 9,000 students, and approximately 60% are eligible for federal Pell Grants. That means we have a large, low-income population. So the workforce of the future, you've got to not leave people behind, like those who may not be able, out of their own pockets, to afford post-secondary education. 31% of our students are single heads of household. And so, again, the challenges that our students face in getting the engineering courses, the science, technology, engineering, and math courses that they need to succeed in this coming workforce is difficult. About 40% of our population, 41% this year, is people of color. And so knowing the cultural aspects and making sure that we have the supports that we need to be able to see success, knowing that there's achievement gaps between the white populations and those of color, and how do we address them and bring those students up to the level that they need to be in order to achieve the self-sustaining careers that they're looking for. The other thing I'll say is that in a knowledge economy, Credentials are important, and post-secondary credentials, whether it's a one-year certificate, a two-year associate degree, a four-year bachelor's degree and beyond, is going to be essential to the future. And so as a community, in order to have Massachusetts retain its knowledgeable labor force, we need to invest more in higher education, and especially in public higher education. So thanks.
For Youth Build is a program for 16 to 24-year-olds who are out of school and out of work. We have 250 sites in 46 states here in the US, and we have 80 programs in 23 countries internationally. There are 350 million young adults aged 16 to 24 out of school and out of work in our world. In the United States, it's over 5 million. So when I think about Youth Build and our young people who've already dropped out of school and are not in a four-year college or not in a community college space, nor are they in high school. They're not taking advantage of the P-Tech programs or these innovative high school programs that are connecting young people to STEM. They are the population that, as Pat just mentioned, is at risk of being left behind continually. So I'm really focused on where the jobs will be 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Whatever the jobs are, we must work together globally to make sure that these young people are not left behind. And so our hope is that we can connect our young people to IT and healthcare and other opportunities beyond construction or beyond food service and retail. And our hope is that we can build our partnerships with post-secondary education institutions for our young people to have these opportunities.
Thank you, guys. Holly, I'd like to ask you about robotics and AI. Basically, I just want to know how the workers of the future can develop a complementary relationship with robotics. Like, what kind of jobs will they be doing that they can work together with AI and robotics? What industries have the greatest need for robotic assistance over the next 2 decades? And are you worried that some industries will lose many jobs because of AI advances?
So no, I'm not worried about losing jobs. Are robots taking over jobs is the question we used to get asked 5 or 10 years ago about are robots taking over the world? And then we saw videos of robots falling over at the DARPA Robotics Challenge, and we weren't worried about them taking over the world anymore. And they're not coming for our jobs either, but they're going to allow us to do our jobs in different ways. So right now, we actually have a huge problem in the US where we need to do plutonium cleanup. There's a lot of Cold War legacy out there. Robots are perfect for this, but yet robots aren't smart. They're not as good as humans, and in fact, their sensor systems are very much poorer than ours. So if we can have a robot that we can send into the nuclear radiation and keep the person outside, but the person can control that robot. So there's opportunities for taking people out of harm's way, but yet still allowing them to do the work without running into those dangerous situations. Right now, BMW down in South Carolina is introducing more and more exoskeletons onto their lines. They're actually building more and more cars, and they're hiring more and more employees as they're introducing more robots. So they're not actually cutting workers, they're adding workers. And the way they look at it is that if they train a worker to do something on their line, if that worker gets injured, now they have to train somebody else. So they're looking at any technologies that they can do to allow those workers to be more efficient and to actually get the jobs done without getting injured. They're also looking at some of their tasks. People don't do a good job. People aren't as consistent, for example, in pushing the door seal on, whereas a robot can do that really well. But as you heard on the prior talk, we want to have robots we can be next to. We want these collaborative robots that we can work next to on the factory floor. And if I get in the robot's way, it'll either stop, or if it nudges me, it's just like a person nudging me. It's not going to hurt me. So I think there are a lot of opportunities in manufacturing, a lot of hazardous cleanup, a lot of search and rescue. First responders are going to use more and more robotics. And you know, I think robots are great. I've been working in the robotics area for many decades, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to deploy them space as well, and send people, send robots to Mars before we send Matt Damon, so that the robots can grow the potatoes first.
Well, I worry about preparing students to take these jobs. And it means that our students are going to have not only the skills, and I know we talk a lot about skills, but also we need to really still invest in the liberal arts area. When I talk to employers, whether they're employers who are looking at highly scientific areas, Medtronics, those kinds of things, they're talking about people who can think, who can problem solve, who can communicate. And this is how, and the liberal arts are how you do that. And so we're working really hard at North Shore to make sure that, yes, we teach the skills. For example, we have about for 20 years now, a pre-engineering engineering program in the city of Lynn that has transferred many students along to UMass Lowell. But making sure that they also have the ability to problem solve and to think critically. These are important. This is what does make them us different from the robots, right? So that we can do those problem solving. We know that by the time they get to us, whether they're the 27-year-old that's coming back from being dislocated in their work, having their jobs go away, or whether they're coming out of high school, we know that STEM education is cutting across all fields. So one of the things that we did early on when we started what we call the Communiversity at Lynn, which is a shared impact collaborative, was to build an IT pathway that went from preschool through K through 12 into early college by the time a high school student was 15, so that by their high school graduation they could accumulate 30 credits in that pathway and have a year of college already completed, so that as they go on, and whether they're going into the health field or the financial field or into criminal justice, they have technology skills. Because you're right, across the board there's going to be robots, there's going to be the need for having those kinds of skills, and our students need to be prepared, no matter what field they go in, to handle that.
Our young people in Youth Build are amazing. They're completely amazing. And none of them believe that they could ever have a career in robotics or in artificial intelligence or even in data science. They just don't believe it until they meet their teachers in Youth Build and they start to trust and open up and resolve some of the trauma that they've experienced in their lives. And it's amazing to see that. So if it's not obvious already, my perspective here today is to make sure that we together as a world make sure these young people are not left out. And equity matters. Leveling the playing field matters. How we make sure that our young people can be part of these emerging fields is critically important. That said, sector-based employment has been a big focus for many years now, and employers are still looking for the same basic skills. They want the positive attitude, they want people that get to work on time, can work with teams, get along well with others. All these skills will still matter. And I also believe that robotics will help our young people do their jobs better. But we need to track them into that opportunity and support them in believing that something like this is possible, that they can be part of this future. And it's heartbreaking when we initially meet a young person in Youth Build, how they say, I can never be that. No one in my family's ever gone to college. I'm from a poor community. All I know is crime, drugs, and homelessness. I can never go to college. We have to change that. We have to do something to make sure that this playing field is more level for them and that equity is possible for them.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what the role of community colleges, and nonprofits like Youth Build, what the role that you have in preparing the workforce of tomorrow is. What's your role and your responsibility?
Well, I'll start. Clearly, as I already indicated, the majority of folks who are involved in higher education are in a community college. The average age at our college is 27. And yeah, we have the 18-year-olds who are fresh out of high school, but we also have the 35-year-old coming back to learn more skills to enter into a new field, or they know that they've reached a dead end in their field or their job is going away and they're going to have to retool themselves. And so one of the things we know is part of our mission is continuing education throughout lifetime look. People just can't achieve a credential and think their learning is over today. This is a knowledge economy. You have to continue to learn throughout your lifetime. And so I think a community college has a really important role in that workforce development work. And most of the community colleges I know not only take that to heart, but work very hard at working with employers to find out what the skills and the knowledge needs are, and designing curriculum that provides that kind of learning experience. But I have to say something here. You know, it's not just our role, okay? I really worry, and we were talking beforehand about sort of the absence of employers in terms of having some skin in the game of training not only their incumbent workers, but potential workers. And one of the things I know we have to do in the community college is bring more employers to the table in a substantial way to reinvent experiential opportunities. Your youth build student will understand that they can do it if they have the opportunity to try it out, the opportunity to learn about that career, and this is what I hope for my students, have a part-time job while they're going through college, or a full-time job in that field, in the pathway that they're learning in, so that by the time they do have their credential, they're already known to employers, they already have what they're seeking, and that's the way I think the development of the workforce in the future has to go. It's not in only us or them, it's us together.
And Youth Build is partnering with community colleges all over the country. About half of our programs, so about at least 125 programs, are partnering with local colleges so that our young people do a college tour for the first time and actually envision a future for themselves that they never imagined was possible. And so we're excited about dual enrollment opportunities that we're exploring. And globally, internationally, I mean, many of our students are focused only on opportunities for project and work-based learning. So we're learning a lot internationally that we can start applying here in the US. But I'll say this, 25% of Youth Build's programs in this country are in rural communities. Robotics, many of these communities don't even have cell phone access in this day and age. They don't have internet access today. And without transportation, they can't even get to school or college or to work. So there is infrastructure, there is policy work that needs to happen to make this field and this future accessible to all.
So all about UMass Lowell, I want to talk a little bit about K-12 education. So I do a lot of work with K-12 teachers, and I think that the emphasis on testing in schools over the last few decades has changed a lot of the preparation of our students coming in. They don't have that experiential learning. We were talking earlier, I did home ec in middle school, right? You can look at that actually as computational thinking. They're following steps. That steps of a recipe is like the steps of a program. When our students that are coming to us have never had those types of opportunities, and you talk to them about programming is like a recipe, and they look at us blank-faced. We've taken a lot of these things out of K-12 education, and we focus on the worksheets and the tests and the math, but they don't understand how to apply the math or how it fits in because they're not getting anything hands-on. So I've been working a lot with middle and high school in particular, trying to get that pipeline with the girls in particular. We're losing them coming into STEM, particularly computer science. They're just not coming. And trying to catch them early. We have a program called Artbotics. We're trying to do interactive art programs with middle school students. Why do you want to have your program loop? Well, you don't want it because you want to do compound interest. You want to make spirograph-like patterns with a robot. That's much more fun, and it's something that you can see, and it's tangible. So I think that we need to address this throughout the entire education pipeline, starting out in elementary schools, middle schools, and I know it's heretical, but maybe walking away from some of these testing as evaluation points only, because it's clearly not working for a lot of the students.
I really wish I would have taken home ec because I still don't know how to bake anything. When it comes to institutions of higher learning, what can institutions of higher learning do to create programs or initiatives that specifically help first-generation students pursue careers with high-income job opportunities?
Well, what we see is that there's two challenges, especially for our first generation lower income students. And the first is preparation for college. And that's why programs like early college, where you go into the high schools and there's actual experience taking the high school students, bringing them onto the college campus, taking a college course, understanding the academic rigors of a college experience, engaging them in college activities so they feel like a college student. That's one area. Another area of doing this is making sure they understand the affordability of higher education. And even though you can look at, there's many options out there, right? You can go to private college, you can go to a four-year public institution, you can go to a two-year college, you can go to a for-profit college. Most of the first generation students that we meet don't understand the differences and what they mean and how to get an excellent, affordable education. And even at that, there's not a lot of supports for lower income first generation students. Not a lot of financial literacy in the high schools that help them do this. There are some programs that do that, but it's not really infused in what they're learning. Also, the concern that I have for many of the first generation students that we meet is they've got to work while they're going to school. And so only 13% of my student population of 9,000 go to our college as first-time, full-time degree-seeking students. The vast majority are part-time, and there's a reason for that. It's because they can't afford to pay for it. And so even when you're Pell eligible, okay, that's only going to take care of your tuition and fees. It's not going to take care of the total cost of going to college, the housing that you still have to have, the transportation costs to get there, the food. 1 in 3 of my students have in the last month been hungry and gone without food. 1 in 5 in the last 6 months have been homeless. And so, they have to work. So how do you afford the total cost of going to college, plus the opportunity cost of not being in the workforce? And so that cost is exceptionally high for first generation low income students. And by that opportunity cost, I mean the time they've got to spend in the classroom, virtual or real, the time to study and so on, means they don't have time to work and earn a living. And so the erosion of the Pell Grants, Massachusetts is the 49th in the country in terms of the amount of financial aid given to students, low-income students. My full Pell eligible students only get $800 for the year out of the state in terms of, that might not even buy all their books, okay? And so I really worry about the affordability. And so I see in many states these promise programs, first dollar in, last dollar in. I think we've got to look at a lot of these new opportunities so that even our low-income first-generation students can have the opportunity to earn a degree, to get into robotics, to get into electronics, to get into the healthcare area. And preparation and affordability, they're the two big ones for me.
So one of the things we've been doing at UMass Lowell is we've actually introduced some one-credit courses for our students who are interested in doing internships and co-ops that are actually run by our Career Center. So the students go through a one-credit course on how to write a resume, and they run through sample interviews. They have another one-credit course on what to do at their internship. So for students who have not had a lot of professional experience, it's a good way to get them into being able to interview better for these jobs. And that's one thing that we've been doing to try to help students get the higher paying jobs while they're still in school.
I just want to add one more thing. I mean, we have a lot of adult students, and so another way of helping students afford college, get into college, is prior learning assessment. And my college has been, for the last 40 years, really developing expertise in this area, where whether you were in the military, 5% of our students are military vets, whether you're in the workforce, whether you did volunteer work, whether you know another language. And of course, we have about 20% of our students are limited English speakers, but that means they also know another language and can get credits for that. Being able to give students, especially adult worker learners, the opportunities to have flexible ways to earn credit is part of what we have to do in the future. Being able to not expect them to sit in the classroom all the time. We're investing heavily in hybrid courses, flipped classrooms, online, accelerated terms. These are the kinds of things you have to do in order to be flexible enough for your students who are working especially, and especially those who are low income, to be able to get to the finish line and to achieve their credential.
And I would just say, in our experience working with community colleges, our strongest youth build programs have partnerships with community colleges. So it's clearly an advantage that the young people have if there's a relationship with an institution of higher learning connected to the program. And then what we've experienced is higher ed and community colleges and four-year colleges are willing to listen to our young people. Their voice matters. They're open to hearing what doesn't work for them, and that has strengthened the program. And a third thing has been where the community college actually offers space at no cost to the Youth Build program for the students to actually attend their Youth Build program at the community college. So they're on a college campus every day. Of course, that makes a difference in their future.
When we talked on the phone before this conference just to talk about what sort of questions I should ask, and one of the terms that we discussed was birth to career as a systemic approach to job creation. But I didn't want to tell you guys, I'm not really clear what that is, so I'm hoping for an explanation of what birth to career is and what its pros and cons are.
Yeah. Well, you know, by the time they get to college, if they're not prepared already, it's already too late. Now, you can go into the high schools, and you can be, and we do. We have TRIO grants, for example, Upward Bound, and so on, where we're working in the high schools. But it may be too late by the time they're in 9th grade. You know, you got to go into the middle school, and then you look at a TRIO program that we have that's called Education Talent Search. And we know that those primary grades are really important as well. The fact of the matter is, you have to begin your academic preparation with early childhood education. And so having strong early childhood education, especially in your low-income areas, is essential to the workforce of tomorrow. It's an investment so that by the time that child gets to kindergarten, they're able to take advantage of the learning in kindergarten. And then it builds on that. So if you don't start essentially at birth with a seamless system that helps a child go from birth into their career, you're going to have basically stop-out points like you see, where you're going to be disaffected and leave the education pathway. We've been working in Lynn at what we call the Communiversity at Lynn. And that's capital C-O-M-M, capital U-N-I-V-E-R, capital C-I-T-Y. And what we did was we brought partners around the table and said, we have to leverage our resources. We don't have enough, either one of us, to do what we need to do in a high poverty area, in an area with a great deal of immigrants and a very low education level. And so how do we work together to build that pathway from birth to career? So we did things like institute this early college that I'm talking about, where we went from 9 students in college classes at North Shore to last year we had 269 students in college classes. We brought the North Shore Workforce Investment Board onto our college campus. This is the one-stop career center that brings federal resources and helps people get real jobs, matches up employers. They're at the table. The Lynn Public School District is at the table, and so we started a Gateway to College program so we could identify at-risk youth who are at risk of dropping out or have already dropped out but are still under 21, to bring them onto the college campus, to get them into college courses so that they can also earn high school credits. These are the kinds of things you've got to do, but it takes an infrastructure to bring people to the table. It takes the willingness. We have Salem State University sitting there. We have our college. We have the City of Lynn. We have the Lynn Public Schools. It takes all of us bringing resources to the table and deciding that we're going to work together and share our resources, share our data, so that we can do a better job for those students. That's a birth to career system that we're building. Not all the way there yet, but
So
we're
it
getting
sounds
there.
like there's mostly pros.
I think pros.
Well, and I think, when you stop at career, though, you abdicate corporate responsibility. You had mentioned this briefly, and we talked about this before. 25 years ago, I worked for Digital Equipment Corporation. I did not know Unix. They gave me a book and a short course. They did not let me go. They did not say that they could not find trained employees. Now you have employers. I have a friend, he was interviewing, and he was asked, have you had a course on Java, or did you use Java in a job? He said, no, but I read a book and I did some programming. And they're like, well, you don't know Java then. He had an MIT PhD. Yes, he can learn Java on his own, but companies aren't willing to believe that they can train, or they don't want to spend that investment, and they just say, they stand up, there are not trained workers. They're abdicating their responsibility as well to these students. It's not just all K-12, it's not just community colleges, not just universities. The employers really need to be part of this as well.
And I say amen to that.
And I would just add, on this continuum of early childhood, K through 12, post-secondary education, and then careers, obviously our Youth Build young people have already dropped out of high school. And again, my concern is that we are taking this on in a different way, but what happens to the 5 million young people who are already out of that continuum? How do we get them back in? So for us, it's been very important to share as loud and as clearly as possible. Our young people should not be defined by the choices they've made in the past, the upbringing that they've had, their poverty, the fact that they've maybe dropped out of school, or any of that. They should be defined by who they are today and who they can be in the future, and how partnerships can re-engage them so that they have these opportunities. Youth Build is just coming off a randomized clinical trial, a large trial of our programs, and we are proven cost-effective in tracking young people into post-secondary education that would otherwise never enter college. However, we have yet to see if persistence in college will actually get them to graduation, which we know is critical. So how do we work together, not just as systems and institutions, but as a society, to make sure that young people not only start college, but they actually graduate?
And to remember that diversity is skin color, but it's also people's abilities. And so people with a variety of learning disabilities or maybe physical disabilities can still have really great careers. And unfortunately, I don't think we're serving those people as well as we could as well.
I'm also wondering how young workers can transition from traditional construction and food service jobs to jobs in the tech sector, and how stakeholders in academia, the nonprofit sector, government, private companies, how they can all join forces to actually make it a priority to help these young people, go for those higher income jobs.
I'll speak first. Youth Build's almost 39 years old, and we started strictly focused on construction. So Youth Build, the young people actually would build affordable housing in their communities, and their neighbors that were homeless would now have a place to live. Well, we've evolved a lot since then, and we've become more intentional. About 10 years ago, we started focusing on post-secondary education. Now a randomized clinical trial is proving that we're effective at it. We never did that before. And what we're doing over the last few years is going beyond construction into healthcare, IT, customer service, hospitality, other growth, job growth sectors that we think our young people will benefit from. So we think that the way to transition from any sector is to just give intentionality to it, and our young people will embrace it. Construction right now for Youth Build students, under 10% of our students actually go into construction. So no youth development program wants to be a program that actually tracks people into jobs that they don't even want to get into. So we have to move into IT, robotics, artificial intelligence, and all these other opportunities for them as well.
And I think you see that no one organization can do all of this. I mean, that's what we realize at our community college, and so bringing social services to the table, leveraging the resources out in the community in a systematized way, that is the future. We're never going to have, look, there's been disinvestment in public education over the last 20 years. And although I'm an idealist, and I hope that that turns around, I'm also a realist. And so when you're, I'll give you an example, when you're dealing with 9,000 students and your total budget's 60 million, we have scarce resources. So the only way to make sure that those folks that come to us that are at risk can persist and complete is to leverage other resources out in the community. Partnerships with community organizations, partnerships with community mental health programs, partnerships with food banks. We have now a pop-up food bank on both our campuses every month because we know our students are hungry. But we can't be a food bank. We don't have the resources to do that. And so the only way that education, employers, and community organizations are really going to develop and prepare the workforce of tomorrow is through collective work together, shared resources. And that's different than the way we've operated in the past.
I think, we only have a few more minutes left, so we're going to open it up to questions and answers. Hi.
Okay. So education is expensive. Continuous learning is expensive. Conferences like this are expensive, and I think the term information economy came up. I'm just curious if, to what degree, if any, or what you have to say in the realm of making information more accessible to people, open access solutions, MOOCs, things like that. When students are through the schooling setting, how do they have the skills to continue learning and being able to keep up with changes?
Okay, you're right. This is all expensive. And even when you're relatively affordable, like a community college is, you may not be individually affordable. It's $6,000 a year for 30 credits. It might as well be $60,000 for many of our students, okay? Many of the adults that we work with, we have about 4,000 continuing education adults who come back to learn various skills. There are ITAs through the WIB. That's why we have the Workforce Investment Board on our campus. There are funding streams that we apply for from the Commonwealth Corporation for incumbent worker training that makes that free for employees, but of course the employer has to work with us to apply for that. There are ways to do it, but I can tell you that lifelong learning is an investment that I think pays off in big ways. The Massachusetts Budget and Policy Group came out 2 months ago with a study that showed a very strong correlation with the number of degree holders in the state and the average wage of the workers and economic well-being of that state. And of course, Massachusetts is at the top. The problem for Massachusetts is how to continue to be at the top in a knowledge economy, which is our advantage. Only way to do that is public investment in education. Public investment not only in credentials, but through worker training, incumbent worker training, dislocated worker training, and unfortunately, a lot of this money has eroded over time. I think it's well worth the investment to look at how we can continue to do that. We don't do MOOCs because there's a huge infrastructure that we don't have the resources to do.
There's also a literature saying that their
not as effective.
completion of
Right.
MOOCs is just not there.
But
Very low
PLAs
completion rate.
can do that. We have 250 online and other education opportunities mapped to credits through our Center for Assessment and Learning. So something that you've learned or something that you've done or your military service can map to credits and bring you along. Those are the kinds of things we're trying to do. Does that help?
And I focus on digital learning. I was just curious if methods for trying to invest in making information more democratic and less exclusive to people who have to pay tuition.
Well, we've been doing a lot of OER. I think you guys have too. That's Open Education Resources. We just had a TACT grant from the feds to look at and develop more OER, and we're now notifying our students which of the course sections have an open education resource opportunity, so you don't have to pay for books.
Right. There's also a fantastic number of movies out on YouTube that you have to really curate them, and this is where actually a librarian can come in. But there are some fantastic courses that are out there outside of the MOOC. So the problem with MOOC is people pay money and then they don't finish and they don't get their credits. But if you can watch YouTube videos without worrying as much about getting the credits but learning the material, that can be a different way to go about it. Huh? Yeah, then Udacity closed everything. So
Well, the completion rates are tough, and that's why we're really investing more in hybrid and accelerated terms and other flexible ways to get that out there. But you're right, it's expensive.
How about job training for technical stuff for seniors?
Job training for seniors. Well, you know, I don't think people stop working as early as before for a lot of reasons. The Great Recession certainly hit the baby boomers like me, and many of us still in the field and still working. But there are dollars from the feds through the senior agencies to help with retraining. And you can go back to a community college and get technical skills paid for if you qualify for those funds. We also do things, many colleges have what they call senior programs where if you come in at the last week of registration for class, you can only pay the fees for the course and tuition is waived. And there's other ways to do that. But I think, again, it's about continuing to learn.
Hi there. I was fascinated by your remarks about the retreat of companies in terms of training. I think it's a fascinating trend. I'm curious, though, now that we have practically one of the lowest unemployment rates that we've had in quite some time, the employers, are they coming to you in greater numbers looking for people, given that there's a significant worker shortage almost across the board in almost every field? And are they coming to the schools in greater numbers? What kind are coming to the schools? And even, John, with your program, are they coming to you saying, we would like to work with you in some way or another because we simply have jobs that are going unfilled?
We do have a higher level of recruitment today, and I could tell you in certain fields, especially our health technology fields and in those high demand fields, we can, sometimes our students are placed before they even graduate. All right, so that's true. The biggest problem, I think, is that, there's not enough investment up front by employers in what I keep calling experiential opportunities. Our low-income first-generation students won't leave a job they have to do a 3-month internship with a company because at the end of that internship, now they don't have a job again. They can't do unpaid work, all right, because they have to put a roof over their head. The whole area of apprenticeships and internships and infusing students into employers' sites and jobs needs to be reimagined in the community college, and it's something that we're working on. Something like an alternative staffing agency type of approach is probably going to do much better for us in the future to get them into those jobs early on so that an employer can work with us to develop that staff person, that new worker.
To answer your question, yes, I have robotics companies that want to come and talk to my classes on robotics, and they want to get in and they want to sell themselves as the best employer really early on. So there's definitely a lot more recruiting right now. That said, even through the recession, computer science was still pretty stable, at least at UMass Lowell. And in fact, our student numbers soared throughout the recession and continued.
And I would just add that what initially was corporate social responsibility partnering with us so that their employees would do a service project with us or be in the classroom with us in some way, interacting with the young people, is now turning into partnerships with global companies that are starting youth-built charter schools internationally, and actually creating employment pathways for them into the company. So yes, we are, even at Youth Build, we're seeing a different relationship with employers.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Do you have special abilities for those with learning disabilities to help them out?
I think the question was, do we have special programs for people with learning disabilities? Yes.
Yes, we have an Office of Disability Support, and 7% of our population are students with disabilities, physical, learning disabilities, yes.
I'm also part of a community that's headed at the University of Washington looking at how to get people who are blind into computing or resources for a number of learning disabilities, and trying how to get more and more people. Because if you're making computer programs for everybody to use and you don't have a particular segment of the population making those programs, you're not really making programs for everybody. So it's really important to have representation from everyone in the area.
All right, well, thanks again so much to Kate, to Holly, to Pat, to John for a fantastic panel discussion. Let's give them one more big round of applause.